Welcome to the NOSA Unleashed podcast, where we want to expose and remove the stigma surrounding mental health by discussing real-life challenges and obstacles that keep us paralyzed and fearful to move forward. Let us inspire you to believe there is more to life than what you are currently experiencing. Now is the time to end the silence and pursue the path to purpose and fulfillment. We will do this together because no one stands alone. Welcome back to the NOSA Unleashed podcast. I'm Laura Burgoyne, joined here with my sister Connie Blackwood as we talk about real life issues that impact our everyday life. And last time we were talking about suicide and how it's impacted both Connie and myself personally and our journey, and how we kind of overcame that, and what were our root cause and root issues associated with why we struggled personally. And today we wanted to talk more about the strategies, about how we can overcome our suicidal thoughts and how we can help not only ourselves, but also those in our life that might be struggling. So Connie, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Uh,
I
Go ahead.
ended last time saying that the most important thing is to talk to someone. And
Right.
I feel like that's where we should start. Because
Absolutely.
if you're having suicidal thoughts, talking to someone is huge. And, I think the last time I looked up this statistic was a long time ago, but it was over 80% of people who actually talk about their suicidal thoughts don't follow through with action. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge thing to know. Like,
Right.
talking about it does something. And I think so many times we think if people knew this about me, then they would think of me as like, not stable or like not mentally well. And
Yeah.
honestly, we need to get rid of that
Mm-hmm.
because I think all of us at one point or another struggle with, do I really want to keep staying in this life? Do I really want to keep staying in this world?
Mm-hmm.
Because life can be hard, really
Yeah.
hard to the point where, it is easier to think of ending it than to keep going. I think sometimes we don't know how high the percentages of people who actually think about it because nobody talks about it.
That's
And
right.
I think we need to start talking about it because that's the best way to deal with it. A lot of times talking about it gets it off our chest, gets it out, and we're not keeping it inside anymore to ourselves. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, that's been huge. Being able to talk to people about my stuff has been huge for me to stay stable and to stay in a good place for me mentally. Um, Otherwise the negative spiral can get out of control. I keep talking about like a hamster on a wheel. You have the negative wheel and you have the positive wheel. You can't have both spinning at the same time. It's just one or the other. So where are you going to
Mm-hmm.
have your hamster running, right? So for
Right.
me, I'd prefer him be on the positive wheel than the negative wheel because the negative wheel never leads to anything good for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think talking to people is important because, number one, you're opening yourself up to sharing what's on your heart,
Mm-hmm.
and you open yourself up to get a new perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times it comes down to perspective, right? Like even with my story that I shared last time, my perspective of who I was as a person was worthless.
Mm-hmm.
And when my perspective of that shifted and I realized that I wasn't a worthless person, that I actually had purpose, that there was, meaning for my life, that's when things shifted for me. And sometimes I would say it will be difficult for you to find that within yourself unless, you have a divine encounter like I did with God. And that's why we need to talk with people. We need to get what's inside of us out. We need to be sharing it with others so they can then, speak truth to us, right? And I know that I had my parents, and when they became aware of my suicidal thoughts at one point in my journey, and I remember they had sat me down and they had tried to speak truth to me, but at that point, I wasn't open to receiving it. And they had tried to tell me how, my life was worth something and that I was loved and all of those things. But in that moment, I wasn't able to receive it. Um, and unfortunately, I didn't in that moment. But that's why it's so important for us to share with people that we do trust, share with people that we will be able to receive from. And maybe we're too ashamed to share with someone we know, right? Maybe the thought of talking to a sibling or a parent or a friend, you think, I could never share this with them. Well, in that case, then I would recommend that you share with a counselor, share with a pastor, share with a teacher, share with someone else, maybe even someone on a helpline. We talked about that a little bit last time. There are suicide prevention hotlines that you can call completely anonymously and be able to talk to somebody about what you're going through. But the main thing is that we need to be talking about it. We need to be sharing with others what it is that we're going through and what we're thinking. What are the things underlying what we're experiencing in our life?
Yeah, silence keeps us trapped.
Mhm.
Like I think of secrecy as a prison, right? Whenever we keep a secret, it's just keeping us captive, right?
Right.
When we open up and we tell people, then that secret can no longer keep us captive. And, it's interesting ever since I've realized that how much that's affected my life, you know, and how much I don't really keep secrets anymore unless they're, confidentialities with people or whatever, because that's a whole different story. But my life is pretty much an open book. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to write a book about it.
Right.
That's for sure. Um, but yeah, like for me, the secrecy part is probably the most dangerous because no one can no one can help you if they don't know something's wrong.
Mhm.
They just
Yeah,
can't.
and realize that if people truly care about you, they're not gonna lie to you, right? Because that was the one
Hmm.
thing that when my parents were trying to help me, I was just like, I don't believe them. They're only saying that because they have to say that to me because 'cause they're my parents, right? But to recognize if someone truly cares about you, then what they say matters. And the
Hmm.
things that they're trying to bring to your attention, are worth paying attention to. They're worth, a lot, and we need to give them merit and be willing to, say, well, maybe there's some truth to what they're saying. Maybe there is hope for my life. Maybe I'm not the terrible person that I think. Maybe I'm not unlovable. Maybe my life isn't worthless, right? One thing that in my journey, I recognize is that, you know, and I encourage everyone who might be struggling in this area, like, what are those thoughts? Like, what are those underlying thoughts that you're having? For you, Connie, it was that you were not loved. Nobody cared about you. For me, it was that um, I was, I had no purpose and my life was meaningless and I was basically a piece of trash. So, what were those underlying thoughts and where are they coming from? Right? I think when we recognize where those thoughts are coming from, that will help us kind of get to the root of the issue,
Hmm.
right? There's always a place in our life where these things started. And, I like to work a lot with people about finding the deeper roots as, when did I start feeling that my life was meaningless? When did I start feeling like um, I was worthless? Right. And then go back to those moments and be able to process them with someone you trust, someone who can speak truth into those moments and even bring you revelation and understanding into what was happening in that moment. And like you said, Connie, be able to shift that perspective,
Hmm.
right? My perception of that moment in my life, for whatever reason, I took it that way, but that wasn't the reality. And being able to shift those perspectives can help shift you out of that place where you are hopeless and you have no sense of will to live, to realize that there is more to this life.
Yeah. For me, recognizing the root was a progressive thing
Mhm.
because, like I said last time, it wasn't just the feeling unloved. That was the piece that threw me over the edge.
Mhm.
But there were so many other contributing factors, and it was a healing process that took time. And I think it wasn't until I was like well into my 20s and 30s before some of those root causes were finally dealt with. But yeah, I was
Mhm.
no longer suicidal, but those things still needed to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And it still was creating havoc in other areas of my life. And so some of these things may take time to heal. So
Mhm.
don't get discouraged if it's not like instantaneous.
Mhm.
Sometimes damage that takes a long time to happen in our lives sometimes takes a long time to heal. And that's
Mhm.
okay. Each day, I think of it this way. Walking in freedom means that I'm freer today than I was yesterday. So I just keep on my healing journey to become freer each day. And it's amazing how that actually helps me move forward. That actually helps me keep going on those tough days because I'm like, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. All right. It has gotten
Mhm.
better every time I've gone through this. It's going to get better.
Mhm.
And I think the other thing is sometimes when we talk about replacing negative thoughts with positive thoughts, you hear all these people talking about positive thinking, right? And the one thing you need to remember is don't replace it with a lie. Replace
Mhm.
it with something that's true. So, don't say something that's not true because then you know that you're never going to get there. But if you're replacing it with something that's true and positive, then that's something that you can actually reach out for.
Mhm.
For example, when I was telling my story, I said I was loved by that one person in my family, and I recognized that other people loved me in my family. They just had a hard time showing it because there was a lot going on with 5 kids, right? And
Mhm.
so, and there was a lot of stuff going on in our family. And when I recognized that, I could apply it to a lot of different things, but I had to come to the point where I shifted my mindset. I had to come to the point where I believed those positive thoughts that were true. My family did love me, right? Even
Mhm.
on the days where it didn't really feel like it, they still loved me.
Right.
Like, for instance, when Laura was saying she felt hated, I never hated her, but yet she felt hated by me, right? And
Mhm.
so, that's sometimes like I really wish sometimes I could go back and go and change how I acted towards her because then she would have known she was loved, right? But sometimes we don't recognize it. I was a teenager, right? Teenagers have angst, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we don't know how we are until later on in life.
Yeah. And another thing I want to mention is when you start recognizing some of the, like, the root self-talk and the where are these thoughts
Hmm.
coming from, and you're starting to wanting to shift, change that script and replace some of those thoughts. Like, what some of the things I've had to say to myself when I'm going through particularly hard seasons is, when I feel like projecting, well, this is going to last forever, right? A truthful statement that I say to myself is, Laura, this is not going to last forever. You can do this, right? You can face this. You can go through this, right? What are some ways that you can find support right now, right? And not try to struggle through it alone, but, recognize that this is just a season. And you know what? Like you said, I made it through last time. I'm going to make it through this time, and be able to, really put into perspective what is going on in my life right now and what is the truth about that, right? Because our minds, and the enemy really capitalizes on this, but likes to exaggerate things,
Hmm.
right? And when we feel a negative emotion, we feel it to the extreme. And, we need to recognize that that's what's happening and be able to really put that into perspective and say, you know what? Today was a really bad day, but this day doesn't define my future. And this day doesn't define who I am, right? Maybe I messed up today. Maybe I screwed up today. Maybe I completely embarrassed myself today. Well, that's not the end of my life, right? There's so much more to who I am than what I've done and, a momentary mess that I've made. And so be willing and able to, say those truthful statements like, this isn't going to last forever. Laura, you know what? Maybe in that moment you messed up, but you know what? People still love you. You know what? They still care. You'll do better next time, right? Be willing to pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward. And I loved what you said, Connie, about freedom. Like it's a daily journey,
Hmm.
right? You know, every day. And I've always had this perception, and I don't know if you do this, Connie, but I always try to beat myself, not like in a physical sense, but like if I achieved if I achieved this today, then my goal tomorrow is to do just a little bit better, right?
Hmm.
And I don't compare myself to others, I compare myself to myself. And it's like, okay, well, this is what I could achieve last week or last year. Well, I'm going to try to improve. I'm going to try to grow. I'm going to try to heal more. And I just, use myself as my own benchmark and, continue moving forward, continue growing and continue moving in the direction that I want to go.
I do that as well. And it actually does help. And because when I'm comparing myself to myself, I'm not tempted to compare myself to other people. And,
Hmm.
when you start comparing yourself to other people, it is literally like comparing apples to oranges because no two people are the same. You can't expect to be like anyone else. We are all unique. That's why our
Yeah.
fingerprints don't match, right? Like, hello, that should be an indicator that you're not like anyone else. And so you can't expect the same thing for your life as someone else. Even me and Laura, we grew up in the same family, yet our
Hmm.
experiences have been significantly different, right?
Yeah.
So this is something you need to take into account. No two people are the same. You can't compare your journey with anyone else's. And the other thing I want to say is that God did protect me, but I don't want you guys to think that that's, you know, a invitation to try things. Because I didn't
Hmm.
say that last time. That's not an invitation. Um, God protected me because he knew I'd be here sharing with all of you what he did, right? And it wasn't because like I did something. It was because he did something, right? If he didn't intervene, I wouldn't be here. And so I'm very grateful for that, but don't take that as a license to go, okay, it'll work for me too. No, 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 no. That's not what this is about. Um, it says in the Bible, don't test the Lord your God.
Hmm.
So don't do that. Um, yeah, I just wanted to say that because I don't want people to think that, oh, if it worked for her, it might work for me.
Hmm.
So,
Another scripture that comes to mind in kind of light of that, what you just shared, is no matter there's no temptation that is so great that God doesn't understand, and He will always provide a way of escape, right?
yeah,
And even for my situation, the temptation was to end my life, but God provided a way of escape, right? When those girls left that bathroom, I could have still stayed there and I could have cut myself until I ended it. But God provided a way and I followed followed his lead, right? Like I took
yeah,
that opportunity to get out of that moment and to cry out to him, right? And so, you know, maybe God has intervened for people in those ways.
Oh
They've
yeah.
they've missed it. They haven't seen it for what it truly was. And
Mm.
sometimes people, weren't able to find what they needed in the moment to bring them some healing and restoration, and they ended up following through, and they ended up ending their life. But other
Mm.
people, I've heard many testimonies of people where they, I one I situation is coming to mind is, this person was ready to hang themselves, and someone starts pounding on the door, and they're just saying in their head, go away, go away, go away, right? But the person was persistent. They just kept knocking on the door. So finally they're like, fine, I'll go answer the door. And they opened the door, and it was this little boy. And the little boy felt this insistent urge to come to that person's house and say that they were loved and that God loved them. And that changed that moment for that person,
Yeah.
right? So, how many times do these things happen in our life and we don't always recognize them for what they are? That
Oh.
there is a God who cares. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that he does intervene.
Oh,
And
he
I believe
definitely
that he
does.
does come and he does give us a way of escape. And the question is, are we going to take that? Are we going to take those opportunities and really, you know, seek out help, seek out someone to talk to, someone to help us through those trials so that we don't fall into that trap and, follow through with those intentions of ending our life.
And this is one of those opportunities, by the way. This
Mhm.
is us talking about this and sharing this with you is your opportunity to turn things around, to go talk to someone, to open up and let those things out. Because a lot of times when we bury it inside, that's when the enemy just builds and builds and builds and it festers and grows. But once we get
Mhm.
it out, it's like cleaning a wound, right? Then it can actually get some healing. Then it can actually start the healing process. But you have to get it out. Otherwise, that
Yeah.
infection is just going to keep getting worse. And so, to end where we began, find someone that you trust,
Mhm.
whether it be a counselor, any like a pastor, a teacher, a friend, a family member, whoever you can trust that you can really open up to and be honest with.
Mhm.
Find that person, or a helpline if you don't have finances and you're desperate. Go to get a helpline. They're free.
Mhm.
It's worth it.
Absolutely. Is there any last words you want to say, Connie, before we end today?
Um, if you find that you've been dealing with some of these things and it's because of medication, consult your doctor, follow the instructions. Um, it's always important to do that because sometimes coming off of them can also be dangerous, so be careful.
Mhm.
Um, if it's because of other things, allow yourself to open up. I know it's hard. I've been there. It's really hard, especially if you've been taught all your life that secrecy is so important. Like, don't let anyone in. You need to let that go because that's not true. If you can
Mhm.
let people in, there are safe people you can let in. And it's important that you do
Mhm.
because those safe
Yeah,
people are the ones that carry you through. Right, Laura?
that's right. And you know what? This might seem touche, but it could literally save your life,
Literally.
right? Literally
Mhm.
save your life. Um, and I'm here to tell you that your life is worth living. You're here, you're still breathing because you have purpose. and
Mm-hmm.
God has a plan for your life. And maybe you haven't figured it out yet, but God still has a plan for your life, and it's a good plan. And so don't take even 1 second for granted. And if you find that you are struggling and you are having these prevailing thoughts, reach out to someone. Don't waste another minute. Let those things out. And like Connie said, start your journey of healing. And maybe you don't have anyone. Maybe you um, don't even know where to start. If you've resonated with Connie or myself and our story, and you want to chat with either one of us, feel free to reach out to us at the No One Stands Alone Foundation. We do journey with others through mentorship. And, if that's an area where you are like, yeah, I really do need to talk to somebody, and, you really resonate with either one of our stories, we are open to chatting with you. And you can go on our website at nosafoundation.com and just book an appointment with either one of us. Or we do have other mentors too. You can read our profiles and see who you best connect with. And yeah, we would love to meet with you as well. And one last thing I want to mention before we close for today is we do have an upcoming webinar where we will be talking more about suicide, maybe some more of the signs to be looking for, how we can help not only ourselves, but our loved ones, and other strategies. We'd love for you to join us live on Zoom, and that's happening Thursday, August 7th. And so mark your calendars, and you can RSVP on our website so that you get the private Zoom link. And we would love to see you there. That's all I have for you today. So we'll see you next time on the NOSA Unleashed podcast. Bye.
Bye.